Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Now Foods monthly webinar series. My name is Susan Valakis, and I'm the Training Development Coordinator for our online education program, Now Productology. If you have questions during the presentation, just click on the little chat bubble that you see on your screen, type your question, and send it, and we will respond directly to you by email within 24 hours. And finally, about an hour or so after the presentation, you'll receive an email with a link to the recorded copy of this presentation so you can use it for replay or to share it with your staff. So let's get on with the show. Today's webinar is presented by one of my favorite speakers and one of our very own at Now Foods, Neil Levin, who serves as our Senior Nutrition Education Manager. Neil is also a nationally board-certified clinical nutritionist with a Diplomate in Advanced Nutritional Laboratory Assessment. He is a professional member of the International and American Associations of Clinical Nutritionists and also a member of the Scientific Council of the National Clinical Nutrition Certification Board. And he's also on the board of directors of the Mid-American Health Organization, or MAHO as you may know it. So with that said, I know that Neil has some really great information for us today, so let's get started. Welcome, Neil.
Thank you, Sue. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this presentation. We're going to be talking about the products in our brain and mood support category in our catalog, etc. So there's several sections of this. First, I want to talk about what's happening with the brain as people age, because that's a big concern for this category. And according to the National Institutes of Health in the US, people get changes in their body, including the brain, as we age. Parts of the brain can shrink. The neurons and the neurotransmitters that carry messages between them can change also. And blood flow is often reduced as arteries may narrow and there's less growth of new capillaries. So the blood supply for the brain does not maintain itself as well as we age. These are normal aging concerns. And some people will get plaques and tangles. This is thought to be a sign of potential Alzheimer's disease, though it's not directly linked to it at this point. And we see damage by free radicals increasing and inflammatory conditions increasing. And this is the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, saying this from the US government. So this is very important, the last 2 points here. Damage by free radicals and inflammation increasing are two things that we're going to touch upon later in this presentation. They are directly relative to the way some of our products are working. And University of California, San Francisco has a memory and aging center, and they have stated that a lot of scientists think that these major declines in mental abilities are not inevitable, are not certain as we age. We used to think that when we were born, we had all of the brain cells that we would have for our entire life, and that as we age, we will gradually lose that ability to replace or maintain our brain cells, and they will decline. However, in recent decades, we've found that the brain is more plastic or adaptive, and new cells can be generated, repairs can be done to the brain, and that gives us hope as we age for a healthy aging and maintaining our mental capacity, our mood control, and all those other things. Now, they also point out lifestyle, overall health, environment, and genetics all are believed to play roles in how the brain ages. So we can affect this by changing our lifestyle and environment, not our genetics, but the way the genes are expressed do depend on environment. So after that broad overview, let's look at how experts believe nutrients affect the brain as it ages. First of all, when you go to Alzheimer's.net, they will list foods that can actually promote memory loss and increase the risk of Alzheimer's versus foods that are considered healthy. So on the left, you'll see white foods. These are processed foods: white bread, white flour, white rice, white pasta, white sugar. These are all highly processed foods that do not contain all the nutrients of whole grains. On the top right, you'll see processed foods and meat. And these are meats and cheeses and things like that that are heavily processed as well. And at the bottom, you'll see margarine, microwave popcorn, beer, and they will contain diacetyl or nitrates, which are considered harmful to the brain. This is not all margarine. This is not all popcorn. This is not all beer. It depends on how processed the ingredients are. So the more chemicals and ingredients they add to these things, the more likely they'll be harmful. And Harvard Medical School talks about, specifically for women's health, there's a diet and memory connection. And women who ate the most saturated fats from red meat and dairy products perform worse on tests of thinking and memory than women who ate lower amounts of these fats. So the Mediterranean diet is often called out as one of the most ideal diets in the world. Now, the Mediterranean diet, which is kind of centered on Crete and that area in the Mediterranean, but certainly has a lot of similarities. If you go from Israel and Palestine and the Middle East all the way to Spain, you'll find some similar components to diets in that whole region. So produce, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, fish, olive oil are the basis of that diet. The fish are high in omega-3 fatty acids, and they have been linked, according to Harvard, to lower levels of beta amyloid proteins and better vascular health. Now, beta amyloid proteins are proteins that can form in the brain that are considered a potential problem because they can make the a basis for converting these into plaques, which would be representative of Alzheimer's disease. They are not inevitably going to turn into plaques, but that is the material that plaques in the brain would be made of. So keeping the level of beta amyloid proteins low in the brain is considered a protective factor. Keep the brain healthy, maintain the brain's health. And they also talk about alcohol. Moderate alcohol consumption can raise the healthy HDL cholesterol, what Dr. Oz would call the happy cholesterol, HDL. It also tends to lower insulin resistance and allow blood sugar to be controlled better. We're talking about moderate alcohol consumption. This is like 1 or 2 servings of alcohol a day. It's like 1 or 2 beers, 1 or 2 shots of a heavier alcohol. We're not talking about heavy alcohol consumption, but moderate alcohol consumption actually has some health benefits. And beyond diet, they want to control cholesterol, blood sugar, and blood pressure. And they suggest diet, exercise, and medicines. That's kind of contradictory because they say diet's not the only way, but they include diet here. Quit smoking, exercise, keep your body weight in a healthy range, your body mass index. These are all techniques that Harvard Medical School recommends to preserve memory. And going back to Alzheimer's.net, they have some foods that they suggest are good for maintaining our memory. So they're saying leafy green vegetables, salmon and other cold water fish, which of course would be a source of omega-3, berries and dark skinned fruits, coffee and chocolate, in moderation, of course, extra virgin olive oil, and cold pressed virgin coconut oil. You will see similar lists if we look at other organizations talking about preserving memory. For example, WebMD. You'll see basically a lot of the same things here. This is a little broader list, but berries is on both lists. Fish is on both lists. Here they're adding nuts and seeds. And because it's the fats, raw or roasted does not change their benefit. Avocados, whole grains, beans, pomegranates, another fruit, chocolate, and tea. And tea would be kind of similar to coffee in its benefits. They both contain some natural antioxidant type compounds. That would be polyphenols and the like. And the British Broadcasting Corporation, BBC, in their Good Food article, lists 10 foods to boost brain power. Again, whole grains, oily fish, berries. Here they have tomatoes. They're actually recommending B6, B12, and folic acid, which help control homocysteine in the body. Black currants, again, the fruits and berries, pumpkin seeds, broccoli, sage, and nuts. So we do see similarities between these lists with certain overlaps. And the dietitians, they talk about eating veggies, especially cruciferous ones, getting berries and cherries, omega-3, and walnuts, which again contain a different kind of omega-3. So there's a lot of similarity between what are considered healthy diets and healthy foods. So let's talk about specific nutrients and how they may affect the brain and brain health and mood. First of all, we talked about omega-3 a minute ago. DHA is the long chain fatty acid, 22 carbon. It's an omega-3. It's a component of the brain and the eyes. The brain and the eyes are actually very closely related biologically. And also sperm and testicles and other components. The nerves depend on DHA. Our nerve coating, the myelin sheath coating our nerves, is partially made of DHA. And the brain is mostly fat, and most of the brain's fat is DHA. So DHA is one of the main fats, certainly the main supplemental fat for the brain. And here we have supplements of DHA can promote enhanced memory and reaction time for healthy people. So we're seeing this is, you can get this in basically one of our really strong caps of DHA or two of our regular DHAs, the 500 milligram, you'll get about this much DHA. So it is possible to get this in one or two capsules and potentially have benefits to improve memory and reaction time in healthy young adults. And when you're looking at healthy aging adults, they're talking about age 55 and older. They took DHA for 6 months. They reduced their errors on a test that measures learning and memory skills when compared to those who took placebo. As their blood levels doubled with DHA over the 6-month period, the higher their DHA level went, the better the score on the memory test. So these omega-3 fats, the DHA is not only a component of the brain, a physical component of the brain, but it helps protect the brain and helps protect the nerves as well. And of course, we've got the DHA 1000 brain support, really one capsule a day. This is just DHA, there's no EPA here. And that will give us 4 times as much as our regular strength product, 250 milligram per soft gel. We have the stronger, the Ultra Omega with DHA. that's got 500 DHA, the reverse ratio. That would be 2 capsules giving you this much DHA, or here's one with you get it all in 1 capsule. You're not getting EPA in here, and EPA does have other benefits. But when you're talking about brain and nerves, DHA is really the main fatty acid we would supplement. Now this diagram shows neurons, which are nerve ends, and there's a transmitting and a receiving one, and there's a gap between them, the synaptic gap. And what bridges that gap are called neurotransmitters. They're substances that are like ferries on a river, but they're ferrying across this gap messages from one neuron to the other. So acetylcholine is the main neurotransmitter involved in that. And we're going to talk about some nutrients that help support acetylcholine levels. Now, 3 of the substances that are considered very conducive to supporting acetylcholine levels are choline and different forms of choline that we have. Choline would be available by itself, but it's also phosphatidylcholine and lecithin or separately as a supplement. You would have the other forms of choline that are perhaps more bioavailable or tend to cross the blood-brain barrier, like Alpha-GPC. And there's a substance called Huperzine A that helps maintain levels of acetylcholine that are already produced. So when we're looking at, let's say, one form of choline, the Alpha-GPC, which the C in Alpha-GPC is choline, it's bioavailable and it crosses the blood-brain barrier. And it's a substance that's used to make acetylcholine. It provides the choline in acetylcholine for this transmission of memory and other signals across the nerve gaps requires. And when we're looking at supplementation with Alpha-GPC, we could see that people who are taking this have improved scores in their cognition, and dramatically better than placebo, in fact, in terms of mental state and the way the brain's working. Now, DMAE, which is something that a lot of people don't know a lot about. This is something that my late colleague Alan used to recommend all the time for the brain. It's a precursor to choline, and it works well if you take it with other substances. You could take other neurotransmitter precursors like GABA and tyrosine. You could take it alone, but it's another way to get that choline in the brain. And Huperzine A, which is typically available as a standardized extract of Chinese club moss. It's over 99% pure Huperzine A, though. This is an extract. It penetrates the blood-brain barrier. It helps reduce the acetylcholine esterase enzyme, which breaks down acetylcholine. So if you're reducing the breakdown of acetylcholine, it's easier to maintain adequate levels of that neurotransmitter in the brain. And this is showing 3 charts taking 100 micrograms of Huperzine A twice a day for 12 weeks. And you're seeing significant effects within 8 weeks on overall mental health, mental acuity, and daily activity scores. Between 8 and 12 weeks, both ends of that period, we have significant distinction from the placebo group. Now, you can also get phosphatidylcholine, which is something that is in lecithin. And this is something we used to sell a lot of, but now these other forms like Alpha-GPC actually sell better than phosphatidylcholine. But phosphatidylserine And I use it as one word, which is the technical way to write that. It's on our label, it's 2 words, phosphatidylserine, to distinguish it from phosphatidylcholine or other phosphatides you would find in lecithin type compounds. But phosphatidylserine is needed for the cell membranes and the way that communication and transfer through cell membranes occurs. It is something that helps with the electrical impulses because neurons are electrical in nature. It enhances the release of acetylcholine so that more acetylcholine can be made if the right raw materials are there. And as I mentioned, it exists as a small fraction of if you're taking lecithin. I throw lecithin in my smoothies when I make a smoothie, but lecithin's kind of old school. And we actually have 4 phosphatidylserine products. And a couple of them are vegetarian, the soft gels are not. And of course, we have soy-free now. There's really no difference between the soy and the non-soy phosphatidylserine. It's extracted from lecithin either way. And it's possible that soy lecithin, if it's not changed. For example, phosphatidylserine is extracted from lecithin, so it's not whole lecithin. Whole lecithin, if it's from soy, may have phytoestrogens in there, which are considered healthy. But you would not find those if you had whole sunflower lecithin. But when you're talking about phosphatidylserine, you're talking about a single nutrient extracted from that complex. So you don't have those differences anymore. Phosphatidylserine is phosphatidylserine. There's no difference in molecule between phosphatidylserine from different sources. Some people prefer it just because it says soy-free. Really, there's no functional difference between them. And we have a formula called Brain Elevate. And this is formulated with a couple of plant extracts we haven't talked about earlier today, ginkgo biloba and rose ox rosemary extract. They're known for their free radical scavenging properties, which is commonly referred to as antioxidant properties. Unfortunately for us, the term antioxidant on labels and marketing for products is restricted to vitamins and minerals. So all these antioxidant compounds like rose ox are no longer known as antioxidants on product labels, although you will see that term if you look at actual studies. And we also had phosphatidylserine, glutamine, and choline as other brain nutrients. And if we look at the actual formula, you could see this has choline, this has huperzine, this has phosphatidylserine. In addition, it's got ginkgo extract, the rosemary extract, L-glutamine, which is something that the brain can use as a neurotransmitter, and gotu-kola, which is a botanical, an herb that is believed to support circulation in the brain. So this is a more complex formula and all in one, so you don't have to buy a bunch of different products if you're trying to support the brain. And it will support circulation to the brain. It will support the production of acetylcholine. Another interesting product is the brain attention formula. This is one of the rare supplements we have that has labeling for children as young as age 7. That is very unusual for us. We typically label products for adult use only. In this case, we actually have safety and efficacy data on children's use as well. So this is a good product for adults or children, supporting attention, memory retention, and it's a chocolate flavored chewable tablet. And we're using a trademark material called Sera Q. You'll see the logo on the label there. So what is Sera Q? That ingredient, It's a combination of peptides of amino acids or proteins that are extracted from silk protein, from actual silk. And it allows it to bind to proteins in the brain and affect cognition. It tends to help maintain healthy acetylcholine levels in the brain. It forms beta sheets that are ribbon-like structures in the brain that are considered healthy, unlike the ones we mentioned earlier. And it's believed to interact with brain peptides with different amino acid combinations in the brain so that the brain can maintain its normal function. Now, another botanical that's actually fairly new to our company is the Bacopa Extract. It's standardized to minimum of 40% bacosides, the active, and it's believed to support the brain's free radical protective systems. You remember how the National Institute of Health earlier in one of the early slides had mentioned that free radical damage and inflammation were two concerns about the brain as we age. So taking things that help with free radical protection, theoretically at least, and certainly in some studies there's some support for that, can be protective. This last year was actually awarded the winner in a category for the best of supplements for Better Nutrition magazine. So this is a product that got some publicity last year. Another nutrient of interest is NADH. NADH is a cofactor to make neurotransmitters in the brain. NADH consists of NAD, a coenzyme form of vitamin B3, of niacin or niacinamide, ribose, there's a phosphate group, so it's a mineral compound, and adenine nucleotide, which is made in the liver or other cells. So NADH is a cofactor for hundreds of biological reactions, biochemical, however you want to state that, and is used to make energy in the body, specifically the molecule ATP, which is an energy molecule, an energy storage molecule in the body. Now, I'll mention that some brands sell NADH and some sell NAD. And as you see in that second paragraph, NAD is an ingredient in NADH. And you can actually, in the body, convert NAD to NADH and back again. So it can go back and forth, but there's some energy required to do that. And NAD came out first because it's simpler to synthesize and more stable. So that was a concern until a stabilized form of NADH came out that we were able to offer. So NADH is superior to NAD, even though they're interchangeable on some level in the body, because it does not require conversion to create its effects and to support energy in the body. And that energy is partially used to make neurotransmitters in the brain. The brain and the heart are two areas of the body that use an outsized amount of energy for their processes. So with NADH, we have neurotransmitter support. The Panmol NADH is a patented, stable, and bioavailable form of NADH. So cellular energy and neurotransmitter support are the main claims. Another substance that does help with the brain and nerves is PQQ, pyrroloquinoline quinone. That's a mouthful. So PQQ is the abbreviation. It's sometimes considered to be almost a methylated form of CoQ10. So it tends to help heart health and energy and brain health, similarly to how CoQ10 works. So it's similar to B vitamins. It's an enzyme cofactor. It helps with mitochondria, not only preserving the mitochondria in the cells, but helping promote the formation of new mitochondria within cells. Mitochondria are the little factories that produce most of the energy in the body. And of course, the heart and brain have the most mitochondria, the muscles probably right after that, because they have the highest energy demands. And of course, the heart is a muscle, actually. So we have PQQ with alpha lipoic acid, and we have the PQQ Energy, which has the methyl B12, methylcobalamin, acetyl L-carnitine, and CoQ10 with it. And PQQ, by the way, absorbs really, really well. The body really likes it if you take supplemental PQQ. The absorption rate is almost straight up if you're looking at a graph. So that's kind of interesting how the body does like PQQ and tends to absorb it well. Now, methylcobalamin is the form of B12 that's used by the brain and nerves and the liver. The adenosylcobalamin, also known as the dibencoxide, there's actually twice as much of that produced in our bodies. And that's the form we use for energy. So methylcobalamin's for brain energy and detox. And adenosylcobalamin or dibencoxide is used for overall energy. So there's two different biochemical pathways, two different enzyme systems. If you take methylcobalamin, you are not getting the form that gives you the most energy, though you are nourishing the brain and the liver, for example. So there is a distinction. If you take cyanocobalamin, you're actually feeding both pathways. So that's one reason why we would use cyanocobalamin in a formula, because you get the overall energetic effects from the non-methylated coenzyme form, and you get the detox and brain and nerve protection that would be from the methyl form. And then here's another product. I actually use this one myself, Magtein. It promotes healthy cognitive function. Magtein is a trademarked ingredient. It's highly soluble, it's bioavailable, it delivers magnesium to the nervous system, and it's a form of magnesium L-Theanine. You might be familiar with threonic acid being in ester C, being in our own alpha-Zorb C. So it's something that you might be a little bit familiar with if you know these products. So why magnesium for the brain? It helps regulate the density of the neuronal synapse. It helps control those nerve ends in the brain and in the nervous system. The stability and adaptability of these connections between nerves, the neuronal connections, depends on having magnesium pass the blood-brain barrier. So another way to say it's magnesium L-Threonate is it's a magnesium salt of L-threonic acid. It crosses the blood-brain barrier, increases magnesium in the central nervous system, supports the synaptic plasticity. So it helps us preserve our healthy, normal cognitive function. And when they compared in a study the bioavailability of magnesium L-threonate versus magnesium chloride, magnesium citrate, magnesium glycinate or bisglycinate, magnesium gluconate, we could see that the Magtein, which is the line on the top with the circles in there, was significantly better. In fact, only magnesium had a significant effect on increasing magnesium in the cerebral spinal fluid after taking it orally. So we're looking at enhancement of learning and memory by elevating brain magnesium. This is the form that raises magnesium in the brain the most. And in a 12-week randomized double-blind placebo-controlled human study, significant improvement was observed in the different domains of cognitive ability. There's a composite score, and it shows a significant benefit. The asterisks, the yellow asterisks next to the P numbers above the yellow line, P above 0.05 is a significant, in statistics, it's a significant benefit. On the second one, where it's showing P is less than 0.01, that's like 5 times as significant. So we're looking at very, very significant results of Magtein supplementing and the cognitive scores, executive function, how the brain works overall, working memory, attention, and episodic memory. And when we're looking at executive function, we saw an improvement with 12 weeks of supplementation that's equivalent to reducing the apparent age of the brain by 9 years. So the way the brain worked looked like someone who was 9 years younger, typically. And it tended to reduce stress and tension as reported by the participants. So now you know why I take Magtein. Keeps me young. Curcumin is another product. I actually have a lot of slides on curcumin. I cut them down for this presentation, but there's some interesting stuff here. It's a free radical neutralizer that supports balanced immune and brain function with poor bioavailability. Giving that 95% curcuminoid extract that's so familiar and popular, even giving up to 8 grams a day, they could not detect any curcumin circulating, active curcumin circulating in humans. And if you raised it to 10 to 12 grams a day, you had very low levels of serum curcumin. And the reason for that is curcumin is very well absorbed in turmeric, the root or spice it comes from. And in fact, we have that product that's the CurcuFresh, which is dried turmeric juice, and does contain soluble curcumin that absorbs very well. However, when you extract curcumin and you turn it into a crystalline compound, you have removed everything in the turmeric that makes it soluble and bioavailable. And now it's horribly bioavailable, as the previous slide showed. So companies have various strategies to improve the solubility and bioavailability using substances that are considered solvents and dispersants. They could be natural or synthetic. You could use, for example, MCT oil, or you could use polysorbate 80. And they both do something similar, but one is synthetic and not very healthy. You can try to make it lymphophilic, where it's you're using something like MCT oil that is fatty and you're dissolving it in a fat as a carrier, similarly to how we use ubiquinol versus ubiquinone. Or hydrophilic, where you might make it a nanoparticle, which some companies do, or add things to make it maybe more water soluble to try to enhance the absorption. But there's almost always a strategy for increasing that. Even for our 95% curcuminoid products, we do have products that are in soft gels with a carrier trying to improve the solubility and bioavailability of it. So the form of curcumin that they're looking for when they're looking for active curcumin in the bloodstream, in the plasma, is free curcumin or unconjugated curcumin. So curcumin that is not attached to a carrier is the desirable form in the bloodstream. So we have a form called Longvida in our CurcuBrain product. It crosses the blood-brain barrier and it has superior bioavailability. And the circulating form is the desirable active form called free curcumin. And the way that's achieved is the researchers developed a solid lipid, a solid fat, attached to curcumin. So solid lipid curcumin particle. So the way that works is they make a sphere that is optimized for absorption, but it kicks off the carrier as it passes through the blood and tissue barrier in the gut and gets to the bloodstream. It loses the carrier and allows free curcumin to pile up, get higher levels in the plasma. So by doing that, you have the solid lipid particle work better than other ones. Now, compared to the 95% curcuminoid product, this is 65 times more bioavailable. So if you did, it's like taking 65 capsules of the 95% curcuminoids. And this is free curcumin we're measuring, not inactive metabolites or curcumin bonded to something that makes it inactive. Sometimes you can get really high absorption numbers, but not get any efficacy because you're attaching it to something that will not release it, and you don't end up with the free curcumin that the body wants. And not only is the absorption better, but the half-life in the plasma is better as well. How long will the curcumin last once it's absorbed? And we see that we have about 7 hours for the Longvida, and we have about 2 hours if it's bonded to phospholipids, and the 95% curcuminoid is maybe an hour at best of its half-life. But look at the red versus the white. The white is the free curcumin. That's the active one in the body. The red is not active. It's glucuronidated. The liver has inactivated the curcumin when you have glucuronidated curcuminoids. So not only is the half-life better, but the red ones are not active anymore. They don't do anything anymore. The white bar on the left is still active after 7 hours plus. And when you're looking at how much is in the bloodstream of free curcumin, on the left, there is no free curcumin detected in human studies for the phospholipid curcumin combinations. The Longvida is mostly free curcumin, which can cross the blood-brain barrier. The glucuronidated inactive forms are prohibited from crossing the blood-brain barrier. That's a sign that the body does not want this, and it's on the way out. It's targeted for elimination. So if you can cross the blood-brain barrier with free curcumin, you will protect the brain from free radical attack and support normal cognitive function. This harkens back to that earlier slide where the NIH said that free radical attack on the brain is one of the main concerns for the brain as we age. And the Longvida helps lower the amount of beta amyloid protein in healthy adults, which lowers the risk of that beta amyloid protein being turned into something unhealthy eventually. And there's over a dozen studies on Longvida showing improvement of working memory and attention tasks. Taking 1 or 2 capsules a day for 30 days, it's not something you have to take a ton of. And when we're looking at the scores for fatigue and inertia and learning, we're seeing significant benefits by taking the Longvida for 4 weeks and at 12 weeks. Better pattern separation, Tension, anger, confusion, and mood disturbances were lower after only 4 weeks. So you're getting some significant benefits on the brain from this form of curcumin that you will not expect to get from other forms of it. And let's look at some amino acids. L-Tryptophan is an essential amino acid that is a precursor of melatonin and serotonin that encourages positive mood, restful sleep, stress response. And we not only sell tryptophan, we sell its metabolite 5-HTP, because if you take dietary tryptophan, you're using it to make muscles and you're using it to support the vitamin B3 pathway, and it has a bunch of other benefits. And it's estimated that maybe roughly 10% of dietary tryptophan goes into the 5-HTP pathway to make serotonin. And that's why it's long been roughly equivalent that 500 milligrams of L-tryptophan is roughly the same effect on serotonin as 50 milligrams of 5-HTP, because it's all going into that one pathway. And this is a bean extract, so it's a food source. Now, GABA is another amino acid that's not used to make proteins, but it is functioning as a neurotransmitter. It's typically produced from glutamic acid in the diet, and it's called the brain's calming agent. It's produced in the body. In fact, it's known that in the body, a lot of the GABA is produced by gut bacteria. In fact, you might have more produced if you have healthy gut bacteria in the stomach. More serotonin, more GABA being produced by gut bacteria than is actually produced in the brain. So it's a control for the nervous system. It regulates how the brain and nerves act by inhibiting the number of neurons firing and keeping it within a normal range, which helps promote relaxation and ease nervous tension. Another amino acid that works in that way is L-Theanine. It's found in green tea, but it takes a ton of green tea to make it, and it's not a very clean process typically. So typically the L-Theanine products are synthesized. It's the same amino acid, it's still an L form, but it promotes relaxation without drowsiness or negative side effects. It's also a free radical fighter, so it's in that broad antioxidant type category, even though we can't call it that on a label. And it supports cardiovascular function. So theanine is believed to be the reason why you can drink a cup of tea, green tea or black tea, and it has about 1/3 as much caffeine as a cup of coffee, but people don't get as jittery or have the same side effects from it as they do from coffee, and that has been attributed to the presence of L-theanine in the teas. Now, L-Tyrosine is a non-essential amino acid. We actually produce it from the essential amino acid phenylalanine. And phenylalanine, its main function in the body is to be a source of tyrosine that's actually produced in the body. So we have a pharmaceutical grade purity tyrosine. It helps with mental alertness. It's producing two neurotransmitters, dopamine and norepinephrine. And it also is involved in the stress response, the adrenal response, and it helps with healthy thyroid function because tyrosine is a major component of thyroid hormone. So it helps with energy levels as well. And taurine has a relaxing effect on mood and nerves. It's a simple amino acid. It doesn't have an L or D form. It only has one natural form. There's no synthetic form. The L and D forms are mirror images of each other, so they act differently. They're stereoisomer forms, which taurine doesn't have, glycine doesn't have. So taurine is also known as a heart nutrient. I take it for the heart, which helps with the strength of the heart. It helps control the electrolytes and the sodium in the body as well. So it has a number of roles, but one of them is to be a calming influence on the nervous system. Now, True Focus is another formula, and it supports mental clarity, positive mood, mental acuity, and you can see there's a lot of ingredients in here. It has the tyrosine and phenylalanine. It's got the taurine. It's got DMAE, which is a choline precursor. It's got ginkgo extract for circulation, CoQ10 for energy, brain energy, and it has some vitamin C, B6, and potassium as cofactors. So this is one of the Julia Ross formulas that we picked up from her. She's the author of the Mood Cure book. So norepinephrine and dopamine are used for alertness and mental acuity. Dopamine specifically is used for a feeling of well-being. And the conversion process requires these other cofactors, as I mentioned. Another formula is the mood support with St. John's wort. And we have the St. John's wort, we have holy basil, which is actually considered a mood elevator as one of its three major functions that it's known to do. It has a little bit of valerian root concentrate, 5-HTP, some GABA, a significant amount of GABA, taurine, and L-Theanine. And we have the vitamin mineral cofactors at the top. So St. John's wort is doing the heavy lifting here, but along with some GABA and some other things that would have some significant benefits for healthy nervous system and a positive and balanced mood. And one of our newer products is the Melatonin 5 milligram sustained release. It's designed to release over a 4-hour period. And it's in 2019, it was awarded one of the Better Nutrition Awards as best in supplements. So melatonin is produced in the pineal gland and by gut bacteria from tryptophan and serotonin. And it's involved in regulating our sleep and wake cycles, immune system, maintaining a healthy gastrointestinal lining. The timing of when you produce stomach acid and when repairs happen and things like that in the gut are actually controlled by serotonin and melatonin. And the gut and the brain are connected, and mood is a relevant factor in the gut. And if you have bad gut health, you typically are going to have a bad mood. And physicians may actually prescribe antidepressants to control disorders in the GI tract. So the reason we have this is because a 4-hour period mimics the way that melatonin is produced in phases during the sleep cycle, and that light will interfere with your own production of melatonin. You have to sleep in a dark place. You have to get away from the blue light and screens to be able to make your own melatonin. Taking it supplementally will help to compensate for that. And L-Dopa is a precursor of dopamine. It's used for cognitive functions such as working memory and attention. It helps with mood regulation and positive feeling, because that's one of the ways dopamine release affects the brain. And this is an extract from a bean. And L-Dopa can cross the blood-brain barrier, and then the brain will produce dopamine from L-Dopa. So it's a way to allow the brain to make more. If you just took dopamine, you'd have to inject it, or it wouldn't even cross the blood-brain barrier well. And L-Dopa makes other enzyme substances, and you can convert it into in the stomach and other areas, because dopamine has other effects, not just in the central nervous system, but elsewhere in the body as being calming. So the bean extract is at least 15% naturally occurring L-Dopa. And the bioavailability is great. Look, I mean, look at this chart. Single oral injection and the plasma levels spike and stay up there for hours. And we have the sleep formula. Sleep formula is based on valerian root with hops, passion flower, and GABA. So this we're combining an amino acid with 3 botanicals, extracts. So it helps restful, rejuvenating sleep, and GABA helps to ease nervous tension. That helps you get a quiet night rest. And we have the sleep regimen 3-in-1, which is a newer product. And this one is a 3-in-1. It's got L-Theanine, it's got 5-HTP, and it's got melatonin. And these are significant levels. 200 milligrams of theanine, 50 milligrams of 5-HTP, 3 milligrams of melatonin. So it encourages relaxation. It helps regulate the body's sleep-wake cycle. Improving serotonin helps with a sense of calm and lets you make your own melatonin. And it helps with the cycles. The circadian rhythm of the body depends on these kind of substances. So that concludes my presentation today. I do thank you for taking the time to participate in this, and we'll turn you back to Sue.
All right. Always great information, Neil. Thank you. And great products to go along with it. You know, I'm always so appreciative to be a part of these webinars because I learn so much too. And speaking of learning, make sure you check out our Now Productology online training program for retailers. You'll find it in the retailer portal at nowfoods.com/retailers, and you will gain online knowledge for in-store sales. So be sure to check it out. Remember, you'll receive an answer by email to the questions that you submitted today. You'll also receive a link to the recording of this presentation. So thanks once again for joining us, and we'll see you next month.